BlackRock doesn't come here to fuck around in an asset, right? They come here to dominate the asset. None of these moron politicians, I don't care how much people want to celebrate them, especially Americans, right? My American audience loves like celebrating their politicians. They're all morons to me. When was the last time you saw the birth of an asset class, right? We've never seen it. In my lifetime, we've never seen it. Real estate's always been around. Equities have always been around. For these bond traders, it's not about the Bitcoin. It's about the volatility that Bitcoin provides. And they're now understanding the game. As soon as those FASB rule changes happen, now any quant that's sitting in any hedge fund can now sit there and put MicroStrategy into the model of earnings and price. The beautiful thing about this and the BlackRock web that's been created here is the first time in fucking human history that if you buy Bitcoin, America buys Bitcoin. This is the flywheels, the multiple flywheels that are being created here. And this is how BlackRock takes over the market.
British HODL, welcome back to the show, mate. I always love speaking with you as you've unapologetically pushed more people to get to one Bitcoin than nearly any other Bitcoiner out there. Thank you. But how are you today?
That's a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. I'm great. How are you? We're watching currently the price take another stab at 100,000 as we record this.
It's a pretty exciting day. And the thing that I really like, it's bittersweet, man. And this is what you were saying before. For like the whole bear market, you're really just pushing people. You need to buy one Bitcoin. Just shut the F up and just get to work and buy Bitcoin. Realistically, like 99.9% of the world population did not get to one Bitcoin. Like, what happens to them now?
I don't know. I guess exactly what's been happening to them all this time. Like, look, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, so I said it's bittersweet, and it's bittersweet because there was an opportunity for those people to get to one Bitcoin. I think, you know, when I get emails from people in the Philippines and third world nations telling me that they've, you know, as a token of appreciation and the fact that they've managed to get to one Bitcoin, that makes me feel proud. And at the same time, I'm getting emails from the United Kingdom, where I'm from, America, Canada, Australia, with people complaining that not everybody can get to one Bitcoin, right? Absolute soy boy pussies that have just not managed to figure it out. And that's okay, right? It's okay, because at this point, a one Bitcoin is probably affordable to like 0.6% of the world. And it is what it is. Now you're going to learn the truth behind consequence. Up until now with the fiat world, no one's learned the truth behind consequence. Because if you get involved in property and then your children want to get involved in property, if it's gone up, they can still get involved because fiat world can fuck around with it and make it possible for you to get involved. We can fractionalize real estate. We can fractionalize the stock market. We can do all this shit. Now you're going to learn. Now you're going to learn, and you're going to learn that lesson forever. Your entire progeny is going to learn this lesson, and that's good. That's how it should be. It's bittersweet.
It is bittersweet, and it's bloody tough. Like we've seen over, especially the last year, Larry Fink coming out, changing his tune, Bitcoin's a flight to quality. Jerome Powell putting out a video today saying that Bitcoin it's not an attack on currency, but it's taking over gold, like paraphrasing. And then Putin also changing his tune or like positively coming out and saying you can't shut Bitcoin down.
All on the same day.
All on the same day, the same day that the France government's in turmoil. It really feels like, is this actually happening? Is this real? Like, the timeline's so accelerated. I would have thought maybe these conversations, strategic Bitcoin reserve, for example, would have been happening around 2030. Yep. What's really pushed like the escalation or the acceleration of all these events?
Look, BlackRock is in the game. That's why I spent a year and a half talking about, you know, BlackRock being here now and what that was going to mean for people and what that was going to mean for the market. BlackRock doesn't come here to fuck around in an asset. Right? They come here to dominate the asset. They come here to take over the asset. And they've put everything is in place. You got an ETF, you got the bond market secured with MSTR, you got Coinbase secured for custody and acquisition. The whole field, they own all the miners, they own everything, right? So now is of course the time to get the capital into the asset, because they've spent 2 years strategizing and coming up with this. What do you think? Michael Saylor, who's trying to get 800 million here, 900 million there, 750, a billion. And suddenly BlackRock's ready to go and he gets $42 billion. You think that's accident? Every Bitcoin is jumping up and down. I knew that was going to happen, right? Because this is how it works, right? So next thing you're going to get is NASDAQ approval, S&P approval for MSTR. You're going to get nation state adoption. You're going to get all these things because this is the game plan. The game has already been laid out. None of these moron politicians, I don't care how much people want to celebrate them, especially Americans, right? My American audience loves like celebrating their politicians. They're all morons to me. You'd think one of your politicians, one of your dumb senators that's been voting to send your children to go to war, to print as much money to kill people. You think they one day woke up, read the Bitcoin standard, had an epiphany moment? No, they got a packet in the mail, they got a phone call, and they got told, you are now pro-Bitcoin. That's it. End of story. No campaign finance unless you are pro-Bitcoin. That's what happened here. This is how the game works. Understand how the game works.
And then, so like the next level of the game, it looks like Trump is stacking the deck. You know, I think as Paul Atkins, that he's elected for the SEC chair. Do you believe that the US is actually going to go ahead with the strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Of course, 100%. It's just a case of when they do it. I think that is baked into this now. If you're sitting there going, I think there is a doubt that the US and all these other nations are going to have strategic Bitcoin reserves, I think you don't understand how the game works. And that's okay, because not many people are used to. I had never seen, think about it, in my lifetime, I have never seen an asset get financialized, get securitized. This is the first time for me to see this. I can just, with all the videos that I've been putting out for the last year and a half, I'm able to go and lay out the blueprint because of all my other experience of just logically thinking through, like, what would I do next if I wanted to financialize an asset? But most people have never even seen this, let alone the birth of an asset. When was the last time you saw the birth of an asset class, right? We've never seen it. In my lifetime, we've never seen it. Real estate's always been around. Equities have always been around. Gold's always been around. Art's always been around. All these things have always been around. So this is the first time for a lot of firsts for a lot of people. And we're all now learning. Look, think about how advanced everyone is, just with this MSTR conversation. How many people are discussing the fucking bond market in Bitcoin, right? Like There are people, MSTR has forced me, even with my experience levels, to go and study how the bond market works even more than I thought I knew, because I had to understand what was going on with this trade, right? So it's forced people to get a lot smarter, and those people that have will be on the winning side of this, and those people that haven't just won't. And that's how meritocracy works, and it's okay. So America's coming out with a strategic reserve, guaranteed. All these other nations are coming out with a strategic reserve, guaranteed. And it's just a matter of time, right? It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I believe that as well. And within the game theory of Bitcoin being like the world's hardest, scarcest, most limited monetary asset, once the US goes ahead, other nation states, whether they believe in it or not, their hand is forced to start stockpiling. Do you reckon there are a couple of smart nation states that can already see it, they're understanding, they're already stockpiling?
100%. Why wouldn't you? Right? You see the president talk about it. You see the president have a landslide. Look, China was funding a factory, and Trump just said, right, a factory in Mexico, and he just said in the campaign, if you build that factory and I'm president, I will tax every car that comes out of there at 200%. And guess what they did? They stopped building it. This was before he became president. So if you don't think that they're sitting there paying attention to what's going on with Bitcoin, right? They stopped putting in billions of dollars into this factory. You don't think they would start putting billions of dollars into this asset that the president's talking about? Come on, this is already happening.
Yeah, I agree. So you brought up MicroStrategy. You've got a tweet and you're like, MicroStrategy is going to $35,000 a share. And it's taken you a while to unpack what the MicroStrategy trade is. Like, what is going on with MicroStrategy? It looks like Michael Saylor has been building this digital Fort Knox in cyberspace. It's pretty much what he calls it, this digital fortress. But what's the MicroStrategy trade? And well, first answer that, and then maybe we'll go a little bit more nuanced.
Look, I missed the MicroStrategy trade, right? When I first started buying MicroStrategy, which by the way was on the very first day that they moved their 500 million into Bitcoin treasury in 2020, I scaled down my position as soon as these ETFs came out, because in my mind, MicroStrategy was a de facto Bitcoin ETF. So in my mind, I thought, well, it's more inefficient than an ETF, which means when the ETFs come out, clearly people are going to move their money out of MicroStrategy and put it into the ETF. And I was right for about 3 weeks. And then I was aggressively wrong, right?
Yeah.
And what I failed to realize was that MicroStrategy is creating a platform to allow capital that has never had access to volatility like Bitcoin. And they're allowing that capital to trade the volatility that Bitcoin creates without having the quote unquote risk of being in Bitcoin and going through the change of charters and everything that's needed to get into Bitcoin. In addition to that, that market is $40 trillion big. This is the bond market I'm talking about. And so if you're a bondholder or a bond trader, what you need is volatility. And MicroStrategy is providing that to you. And there's only one source to get it from. And MicroStrategy has taken a multi-year process to consistently and concisely move their entire business towards this end. So no matter who comes after this, MicroStrategy wins, because they are the purest play on Bitcoin in the market. So Mara can have bonds, Microsoft can have bonds, all these other people can come out with bonds, but MicroStrategy is the purest, highest volatile, highest implied volatility play. And that's what they've done. They've opened this up now to the whole bond market, and the bond market loves it, because every time they issue it, it's fully subscribed at 0%. Think about it. They got $3 billion 2 weeks ago at 0% to do this. Why would anyone do that, right? So you got to think about it. You got to stop and think. Why would anyone want to lend MicroStrategy money at 0% for 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, to buy Bitcoin? Where are they making money? That should be your natural question. Where is that person making money? Because they're clearly not just doing it for fun, for shits and giggles, right? So then you have to understand how the bond market works. And how the bond market works is they want to buy these bonds. And then I'm going to try and simplify this in the best way possible. They want to buy these bonds, and then they want to hedge their position on the stock. And then they trade the value of the bond for the term. And because MicroStrategy has got an implied volatility of over 100, these bonds have an implied volatility of many times more than that, right? Right now, it's sitting somewhere between 150 and 200, which means by the time the bond comes up to maturity, they've already made back their money. They've already made back their money that they lent out. So what do you do then? You call Michael Saylor and you say, hey, issue another one. We'll re-up again. And that's what's going on here. They'll refi it, and they'll continue to refi it, because for these bond traders, it's not about the Bitcoin. It's about the volatility that Bitcoin provides. And they're now understanding the game. The fact that Allianz, one of the world's biggest insurance companies, is buying these bonds tells you that the game is different. And the thing that did it for me, the real solidifier for me, was the day that they announced the $42 billion of liquidity to buy Bitcoin. Because you cannot ignore that. They basically said the company was worth 50 billion. They said, we're going to dilute almost 100%. And the company and the stock price went up. Make that make sense, right? That's when I was like, okay, so all of these things that I'm thinking about have just fallen into place, and the game is about to get going here. And that's when I decided to, try and re-secure my position that I had originally.
Does MicroStrategy being this leverage play on Bitcoin bring risks into this cycle, and I guess the price, and what are the attack vectors? What's sort of the downside or the potential downside of this play?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that people are talking about, the negatives of MicroStrategy, right? And the only negative that, Twitter bears can come out with is, but there's an MNAV, there's a premium on top of the Bitcoin. That's a very, very simple-minded argument. And by the way, I had that argument. Right. So I know how dumb that argument is now, going through it and understanding what's going on here. There's only 2 risks to MSTR. Number one is that Bitcoin adoption does not work out the way that we think it's going to work out over the next few years. That's a risk because the value of MSTR is based on the value of Bitcoin. The second risk is the volatility on MSTR continues to collapse and doesn't go up, and doesn't stay up, rather. If that happens, the bondholders will look at this and go, okay, well, now I can just do this with Tesla bonds or NVIDIA bonds or whatever. So MicroStrategy no longer becomes the special case. So those are the only two logical bearish arguments for this not to work. Everything else, if you just think it, take 10 seconds before you say it, you can always come out with the answer of what's actually going on. The MNAV doesn't matter because the MNAV is exactly how you, and then by MNAV, I mean multiple to the net asset value. The MNAV is how you actually convert this into Bitcoin. The MNAV is how you generate volatility. The MNAV is what bondholders are looking for. And by the way, now with MSTR coming up for approval for NASDAQ and the FASB rule changes, here's the thing that people are completely missing. As soon as those FASB rule changes happen, now any quant that's sitting in any hedge fund can now sit there and put MicroStrategy into the model of earnings and price, which is how they judge who to allocate to. Soon as these rules change, MicroStrategy can now put its Bitcoin earnings on the balance sheet. Think about that. So now you can start looking at this and going, wait a second. Their PE ratio is better than NVIDIA. It's higher than NVIDIA. Their PE ratio blows every other growth company out of the water. So what that turns into now is that all these equity funds, forget the bondholders, the equity funds now come in and they can now start owning MSTR as a growth engine, not as a Bitcoin engine, not as a tech company, not as a growth engine, because that's the only reason people put capital into Google, NVIDIA, Tesla, whatever, because it will grow their capital. Well, and my MSTR, if you give $1 billion to MSTR, that growth starts accruing the next week. If you give $1 billion to Tesla, they got to hire a bunch of nerds. They got to invent some technology. They got to put the technology out there. They got to scale production. They got to sell the fucking shit. And then it takes another 3 years before you start seeing growth on that $1 billion. So you're basically giving them share price growth in advance. MSTR, you give them $1 billion, they go buy a Bitcoin tomorrow and it appreciates. You start seeing growth tomorrow. So it is a safer, cleaner, more efficient way to get growth. And that's what it is. It's a growth company and a growth engine. And equity funds are about to be able to start putting that model that they've been using on NVIDIA, Google, Facebook, Tesla, everything else. And they're about to start being able to even apply it to MSTR as soon as the FASB rules change. People really don't understand what's going on here. And by the way, as the share price goes up, so let's say they start dumping in, the share price goes up. Well, now the bondholders love that because it increases what? Volatility. That's all they want. They want volatility because bondholders make no money on the actual stock because they're delta hedging it. They're hedging the stock price on day one. They want to trade the volatility. So as the volatility goes up because of the equity funds, the bondholders are loving it. Now they want more. So they allow and create more capacity for issuing more convertible bonds, which then turns into Bitcoin, which drives the price even more. So this starts turning into a circle. And the beautiful thing about this and the BlackRock web that's been created here is, let's say BlackRock gets nations to adopt this. The first time in fucking human history that if you buy Bitcoin, America buys Bitcoin. Anyone buys a BlackRock ETF, the spot Bitcoin, whatever you want to do. Guess what it does? It increases the value of MSTR, which increases the volatility, which increases the PE ratios, which gets the growth guys in on the equity side, which gets more of the bondholders in because the volatility goes up. This asset web, because it's the same asset everywhere in the world, works together for the first time in human history. And this is the web that BlackRock created now. There is now, by the way, with the options, right? So you had a $500 trillion options market, $2.4 trillion a day options market open up on the ETFs. What do you think that does, right? Because those guys, as soon as they sell me a call option, if I want to say Bitcoin's going up and I'm going to buy a call option, the market maker has to go hedge the delta just in case they're wrong. So now they need to go buy the underlying asset, which then pumps the price, which then pumps the value of my option. And as the delta changes, the rate of change increases and speeds up. They've got to buy more of the underlying just in case they're wrong. By the way, them buying the underlying pumps the overall value of MSTR's assets, which then makes the bondholders and the equity guys happier whether they buy more. This is the flywheels, the multiple flywheels that are being created here. And this is how BlackRock takes over a market.
It's pretty insane. Going back to like sort of the first point of this conversation, for people that haven't managed to get to one Bitcoin yet, they've been horsing around, or they're new to the space and they've just been blindsided to Bitcoin. What are your thoughts? Should they concentrate like just on Bitcoin? Like, it's their money, it's their choice. That none of this financial advice, do as you will, ladies and gentlemen, big boy pants. But or are they better maybe to try go into a leverage play with MicroStrategy, earn fiat, and then cash that out into Bitcoin? Like,
yeah, people have asked me this, and my answer is always you get to one Bitcoin first. That's the most important thing that you can do. You get to one Bitcoin, you put it away, and then you can start doing these other things.
I'm glad you said that. It's really like it's slow and steady, and it's not as exciting maybe, but it's the correct way to be able to go about it. Secure like your generational net worth first, and then go out into the risk curve if you want to, but at least get to that one. No, I really love that. What are your thoughts on Trump changing like his tune? Do you reckon it came about just for like the popular vote, and then Bitcoin came in as sort of a Trojan horse? He like heard when he said Bitcoin, he got a certain response from like this group of people, Bitcoiners, very favorable. Bitcoiners like really will get behind someone or something if it's in their best interest. It's the way the protocol has been built, without really understanding like the Trojan horse that Bitcoin is and how it is there to fundamentally change the world and the way that money is set up. Do you reckon something like that happened, or is more that tap on the shoulder?
You know me, Mike, I have always got conspiracy hat on when it comes to politicians, right? It is a tap on the shoulder and that's it, right? I guarantee you that the Bitcoiners that raised 25, 30 million at David Bailey's conference for him helped, right? Every single one of them deserves credit for actually making that happen. I think whoever's sitting there, on the BlackRock team trying to educate policy around Bitcoin deserves credit. But let's get it straight. If it wasn't for votes and it wasn't for capital raised, this wasn't gonna happen, right? Just realistically speaking. So I think President Trump is a great advocate, is a great person to talk about Bitcoin. But do I think that the president understands or even needs to understand all the full benefits of Bitcoin? No, I'm not on that team. I think that he's great to have there to push Bitcoin, to move the agenda forward. And that's what a president is supposed to be. A president is supposed to be a mascot for the country and for the great things that can happen for the country. And let's face it, Bitcoin is the future. So whichever president is has to be a pro Bitcoin candidate for the country, regardless of their understanding levels.
Yeah, I really agree that Bitcoin is the future. Sort of like I was saying earlier, I feel like the timeline's accelerated, but we're still on the timeline. We're just a little bit forward because of the way that Bitcoin's set up. There's like set rules, no rulers, very decentralized in its growth, and it's a technology. It's the best form of money. It's just sort of got this trajectory or timeline. As long as it stays decentralized and secure, according to Jeff Booth. Like, is there any way now where we are, as long as Bitcoin still stays decentralized and secure, that it fails in this experiment? Like, what other attack vectors on the Bitcoin protocol itself do you think? And then also on that same question, do you think countries are going to go to war against each other to protect Bitcoin?
These are very deep questions. Like, look, I think that Bitcoin will make a country wonder whether they should go to war. I think powerful countries can absolutely go to war for Bitcoin, to acquire Bitcoin, right? I think that's a dangerous aspect of this. Just like they went to war to acquire oil, right? And acquire other resources. Why wouldn't you, if you have, the best military in the world, why wouldn't you execute a Bitcoin acquisition plan, right? Especially if you need to build a strategic reserve. Suddenly, nations that don't play ball become very interesting military targets if they have Bitcoin, right? That's an interesting thought process to have. Do I think that, do I think that countries, that Bitcoin causes that? No, it's just natural human instinct to acquire as much of a rare asset as possible. But yeah, no, those are deep questions. Those are, arguably those are questions way above my pay grade when it comes to strategic thinking. But certainly if I was high up in UK government and we had our heads out of our asses when it comes to Bitcoin, which we don't, by the way, the UK has its head firmly planted square up our asses when it comes to Bitcoin. I would be thinking, as a strategic thinker, I would absolutely be thinking about how we build a strategic reserve by the use of our military. And I know some people are not going to like that statement, but if I was there, that's exactly what I would be thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like an interesting area. We're not going to know until it happens. Hindsight's 2020. But it is nice to be able to ponder. What is the state of like buying Bitcoin in Europe? Like, how easy is it to be able to buy? I guess number one.
Easy. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, it's easy. The biggest problem that we've got right now in the UK is that we're still under the EU's MiFID laws. Like, a lot of people don't understand this. A British citizen, a British resident cannot buy a BlackRock ETF. And I don't mean the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. I mean a BlackRock ETF. Because there are certain rules that are basically rent-seeking rules in Europe, which mean that they need to provide some kind of KID document, which basically, re-registers the fund in Europe and then buys the underlying in America to keep the capital inside of Europe. So what they want to do is, while the fee in IBIT is 0.25, they want to charge 1%, and you buy they just go and buy IBIT on the underlying, right? These are all policies that the United Kingdom, I don't care about Europe, right? Because at the end of the day, hold on. I care about Europe. I don't care about the EU. The EU is on the verge of collapse or on the verge of reform, one or the other, which way they want to go. But the fact that the United Kingdom, after 8 or 9 years of Brexit vote, has not taken back our power when it comes to financial markets, being a financial powerhouse, is completely flabbergasting to me. And I know people like myself that have left the United Kingdom, but if we had a framework, if we had laws, if we had politicians that were looking for the future of the United Kingdom, we would all move back immediately and start building from the UK, because it is our home. This is one of the beautiful things about the US, right? It seems like the US, for all of its flaws, does allow very expedient meritocratic change, which is what seems to be happening at this point. The UK doesn't. And that's a sad thing about the UK right now. The UK just announced, because of the genius that we are now, that we will create a crypto framework by 2026. Just think about how ridiculous that is, right? Look at the acceleration that's happening. And by the way, this is the United Kingdom. We are so closely tied to America. All you literally have to do is copy and paste the American text and it will work in the UK, right? That's it. But we have got our heads up our asses, and we're not focused on the future of the UK. We're focused on managing its decline. We are focused on pointing the ship with the hull in the right direction rather than plugging the hole. And it's a sad state of affairs. That's why I like to spend my time in Dubai.
Yeah. No, definitely fair enough. With with all that going on, Bitcoin's obviously the exit ramp on an individual basis. I have a pretty strong feeling, whether it's just due to the price escalating rapidly, and I have no idea, nor do I really care what it does this cycle, or whether the cycles are broken. Eventually the cycles are broken. Like, Bitcoin to me is going to 1 million, then it's going to 10 million. It's just going up into the right forever over time, just due to the nature and the scarcity of it. And whatever time frame that happens, it happens, I think it'll happen quicker than most people realize. But how long do you reckon people can still buy Bitcoin for?
You mean available supply, or what do you mean by just buy?
Yeah, like just to be able to go onto an exchange and buy Bitcoin and send it to a self custody wallet. I reckon it's going to get to a point where there's just so much demand or so little on the exchanges where it's going to be very hard to find people that are willing to sell Bitcoin, or they like the only way you'll be able to get it is to be able to earn it.
No, I don't think that happens, because markets are markets. It will be at a different price point, but you will always be able to buy Bitcoin. It just depends on what price point. Look, if you told me that, in 4 years I could sell one of my Bitcoin for, I don't know, $30 million, right? I may consider doing that, right? I may consider doing that, right? In the next couple of years. If you tell me in 20 years I could sell one Bitcoin for $1 million, I may not consider doing that. So everything is market based. Markets are dependent on price, and whenever the right price hits, there will be liquidity for people to do that.
Cool. Fair. What's like really getting you excited at the moment, or like over, say, like the last 2 years? There's been so much going on. We had like Silicon Valley and Silvergate Bank, like two of the largest bank failures in American history. We had like the yen carry trade almost blew up the financial markets. The ETFs are here. Trump bringing Bitcoin into the election. Just like the most powerful military country in the world, and for it to be a conversation, Putin coming out today, like it's just so many favorable things. But like, what's really gotten you excited, or were there a couple of stories over the last couple of years?
Listen, mate, my dick has been hard since BlackRock filed the application, right? That's it. It's simple as that. And my entire YouTube channel, my entire journey on talking about Bitcoin has been really like created since that moment, since BlackRock filed. That has been it for me. I've been saying it since then. That is the single most exciting thing that's happened, the ETFs and BlackRock particularly, because the game is over now, right? However you want to look at it, BlackRock's hands in there. So the day that the world changed for Bitcoin was that day. Whether you want to talk about nation state adoption, all that's going to be really exciting, right? And certainly it's happening a lot quicker than I thought. But the game changed on that day, that filing, that moment. That is it. All of this other stuff is downstream of what happened then. That was the day. The most exciting day was the day BlackRock filed that ETF application. That's it. And now we've got permanent hard dicks for the next 10 years, basically, thanks to BlackRock. Who needs Viagra when you have BlackRock in the game, right? That's what it is here.
Yeah. So like, yeah, at the moment, man, because like the whole space is so bullish. We're hitting 99,000.
I don't actually think people are bullish. Do you really feel bullishness from people? I don't actually feel it.
Not really. I think maybe just anyone that's been around for a while is just like satisfied and that feeling of joy.
Yeah, it feels like people have a lot of PTSD right now from the last cycle, right? That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like people are fucking bullish right now.
I don't think it feels like people are ready to FOMO, but the sporting people are pretty bullish, man. Like today, but like,
yeah, people that understand. Yes, I agree with you. But
but in general,
like it doesn't.
Retail's not here or anything.
Bullish. Yeah,
no. I was actually saying something yesterday because I thought exactly that. I guess this morning the mood on X has changed very dramatically and it's gone right up. But I wasn't feeling any bullishness within the markets at all. So I thought I'd check out the fear and greed indicator. As like extreme greed, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense because it hasn't felt like that. So I guess like a question we can go into is, what happens when people start feeling bullish and the FOMO comes? What do you expect? Let me phrase that just quickly, because so many people now are talking about the super cycles here. We're going up for forever and we're never going to have a pullback and stuff. So like, to be able to frame it with that, what do you expect?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to have Bitcoin is, going through a capital saturation moment. Capital is finding its way into Bitcoin. And when that happens, you are going to find Bitcoin having more and more normalized cycles. as and when liquidity cycles change, it will go up, it will go down. But we are going through an S-curve moment here, right? If America starts buying, this is the S-curve moment that we've been talking about. And everyone likes to talk about all these other price models and whatever else. But really, it always, when you look at any technology, and I'm not a math PhD and all this other fancy bullshit, but if you look at any technological adoption curve, it always starts off looking like one thing, and then it goes through an S-curve, and then it sort of stables out at some point. So, yeah, I think we're looking at an S-curve moment here, and the S-curve moment started with BlackRock, and now we've got nation states and all this other stuff, and at some point, we're going to reach a point of capital saturation, and then the cycle will normalize. That I don't think happens. I think we've got a 10, 20-year stretch here before that happens. And when that does happen, you'll find Bitcoin sitting at somewhere between 150 and $300 trillion market cap. And then we'll start stabilizing out as a normal asset.
Yeah. So like some people are going to hear 10, 20 years. I guess, do you expect it just to like go up nice and smoothly, or as it goes through, or there's going to be pullbacks and there's going to be a lot of volatility?
I expect violence. I expect violence to the upside. I expect violence to the downside. I expect sheer, utter violence, which, by the way, makes the whole trade more exciting, right? Because if you're a bondholder, you want that volatility. If you're an equities trader, you want that growth engine that's there in Bitcoin and MSTR and all these other aspects. So I expect absolute carnage and violence over the next. I expect people to be more irresponsibly long than they've ever thought that they were going to be, just to lose it all. Then the bondholders to get in because they realize and understand the trade, like all kinds of violence. And violence is another word for volatility in financial markets. So extreme violence is what I expect for the next 10 to 20 years as this asset gets saturated into. That doesn't mean that we have to have pullbacks that are 80%, right? I don't mean that. Yeah. But I absolutely expect absolute violence to both sides, upside and downside.
And what's like a couple of simple mental models or ways of framing that can help people go through that volatility, that violence?
Oh, buy Bitcoin, shut the fuck up, you get fabulously wealthy. That's why I've been saying it. Like, there's only 3 rules to Bitcoin. But look, at the end of the day, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be an exciting ride to get there. Look, when Elon Musk is putting a rocket ship into the air, right? There's a lot of violence that's happening by those thrust engines, right? That is what I'm talking about, that's coming. And at the same time, it's got to come down so that it can thrust again, right? So just expect violence, expect volatility. I told a lot of my close people this in 2020 that the game's changed now. Like, once you print this much money, the game has changed. We are entering a volatile period in history of the financial markets, and that just is what it is, bro. Like, it's just we're in volatile times. If you can't handle it, reduce your position as it goes up until you get to a comfortable point where you can handle it. But this is a volatile period. Either you got the balls to hang on to the rocket ship or you don't. And it's okay if you don't, right? Because there's going to be some people that buy a Bitcoin, end up with a $3 million net worth, and they're just some fucking hillbilly from some fuck town of nowhere, and they don't know how to deal with that. And that's okay. Take $1 million off the table, right? Protect your family. Take $1 million off the table, reduce your position to the point where you feel comfortable. And even though I don't think you should do that, it's okay to do it, right? But because I have a extreme bullish bias. If you're approaching retirement, right, and you get you thought you were going to retire with $1.5 million, and you're now looking at a $19 million net worth, I don't think there's anything wrong walking into retirement by taking $5-6 million off the table to protect your retirement and your family and everything else that's going on, right? And allow you to sleep at night. So do that. But that's what's coming. We're about to see extreme levels of volatility.
Yeah, and like with volatility, especially what we saw in 2020, a lot of that came from the money printer just firing up. Do you reckon there's going to be like there's a lot of speculation that we're going to go into the biggest money printing event in human history? Do you expect that to come, and do you expect that sort of to happen forever? Or are they just going to continue to debase currency?
Yeah, because it's all a percentage, right? So if you want to look at it as dollars, you'll be looking at it as, okay, this is the biggest money printing event in the world. But if you're looking at it as a percentage, it could be less than what we did in 2020, right?
Yeah.
In 2020, we printed 40% of all US dollars ever in existence in an 18-month window. I don't think we'll do that, but I certainly think we'll print more than, $2 trillion. So, but as a percentage, it will be less, but as a dollar amount, it will be more.
Yeah. And do you believe that like the Fed can ever put themselves in a position where they stop debasing the currency now, or it's just too far gone?
It's too far gone.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up is because I strongly believe that as well. And that's just for that one reason alone. And because Bitcoin is the way it is, that's why I believe it's going to go up forever. It really doesn't matter on the time period. The fiat system's failing. It's broken. And we have a better system. We have a better money. And like you're saying, been framing, BlackRock's here. They're pushing it. Larry Fink's saying it's
the other argument is, even if they stop printing all dollars tomorrow, Bitcoin's still going to $5 million a coin, because there's still a $900 trillion capital market out there that needs a new asset with this volatility. So even if they stop printing money tomorrow, you should have some Bitcoin exposure, because it is a birth of a new asset class. It is being compared to gold, right? So as that happens, it doesn't matter whether there's another dollar printed ever again or not. There's enough dollars out there to make this thing go to the, to go to the moon.
Brother Bullish, thank you so much, mate. What a bloody amazing time here in human history. I truly, like, as I said at the start, British, your message to get people to shut the fuck up and buy one Bitcoin, for anyone that listens, they've changed their entire lives. And I know a lot of people have listened to you, and some people wouldn't have gotten to one Bitcoin, but if they got to 0.5 or they went further than what they ever thought was possible, maybe they need to wait a little bit longer. But that message, for all the people that give you shit, like, what you have done is a really good deed for many, many, many people. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Listen, look, at the end of the day, it's, as I'm contemplating the validity or the eligibility of my message as we go forward of getting to one Bitcoin, I certainly won't be changing the message. I'm not going to soy boy down the message and say, you need to get to 0.25 Bitcoin. I think it's important to have the North Star of getting to one Bitcoin at least.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, there's a lot of people. This has certainly been the most, in terms of like actual feedback, this has been the most rewarding work that I've ever dedicated any of my time to. And I've not taken a single sponsor, not sold a single thing. And it's completely been, free work, so to say. And it's been the single most rewarding thing ever. So it's been a lot of fucking fun dealing with everything, all aspects of it, the positive, everything. Once you start letting yourself go on the internet, you're always going to be surrounded by a bunch of lunatics and a bunch of people that appreciate what you're doing.
The whirlwinds that happened after our last podcast, when I clipped that video, and then with the power law and shit and everything that escalated from.
Yeah, we put that guy's whole thing on pause. That was good.
Oh, dude. And like the power law or whatever, Bitcoin, sure, it's followed power law and it's useful, but it's not a tool to be able to trade. And that's sort of, I believe, everyone's issue with certain people pushing the power law. Use it, look at the model, stop to flow, price charts, whatever it is, but don't use these arbitrary lines to be able to like sell high and buy low. It's a fucking dangerous game. So I appreciate.
I told you on your show, I told you that was the agenda, right?
Yeah.
And they were all lying about it. All the power law pushers were lying about it. And then after that, and after the spaghetti breaking incident, right, that they admitted it, right? They were like, this is how you can multiply your Bitcoins. And it's like, what happens if you get to your 200,000 high on the power opinion, which is what I call it now, the power opinion, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. There's no law to it and there's no power to it. Therefore, it's a power opinion, right? So What happens? You get to 200,000. You sell your one Bitcoin. You sell that, thinking you're going to turn it into 1.6 Bitcoin, and then America starts buying for its strategic reserve. It's completely over. And by the way, if you just study, again, I'll say it again. I'm not a math PhD, but I don't think you need to be. I think the math PhD bullshit is overrated. I think a lot of these academics don't actually understand what the fuck is going on. And look, if you take any technological adoption, it looks like it's always following a power law, and then it suddenly breaks and turns into an S curve. Yeah. And that's what I think is going to happen here too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if it'll happen, say, this cycle. I don't know if this is going to be a super cycle or whatever. And it'll be good, and it'll continue to keep being good until it's no longer good. But we don't get to choose what time that is. And absolutely. Say it hits 200,000 and on the power law, it looks like it's coming down to 100,000. You're waiting, to pick up twice as many coins, but it only comes down to like 160,000. Like, you're fucked. It's game over. You can't make any more Bitcoin. It's not a nice to have. I think it's the most essential thing. Like your message, I truly, truly appreciate it, because I think it's one of the most important things people can do to change their entire life, but not just their life, like their friends, their family, future generations. And yes, it's so hard, and it's getting harder. Bitcoin's at 150 something thousand dollars Australian. It's $98,437 US, like this very second. Like, that's fucking hard, really hard. But if you do what is hard, your life will be easy. If you do what is easy, your life is going to be hard. And they're making it so fucked up. Like the West, CBDCs, digital IDs, what's going on here in Australia, the UK, the EU, like everywhere around the world. You've got an opportunity, like, seize the day. So I want to hand it over to you. Final message, British HODL, that people, I don't know, whatever, positive message, fearful message, something you're excited or dislike in this space, the floor is yours, my man.
Yeah, look, I'll say one more thing about that whole trading bullshit, right? To quote unquote multiply your Bitcoins. Firstly, if you're listening to anyone with a price model and they're telling you that shit, I want you to hold them accountable for selling their coins. Ask them for proof. Did you sell your coins at $200,000? Because that's really the case, right? I'm telling you right now, I'm never selling my Bitcoin ever, right? So ask them. Once it gets to that point, ask them. They've been going on about it for 9 months now, the whole clan of them. Ask them all. Show us evidence that you sold your coins at 200,000. That's what you're telling me to do. You're telling me to sacrifice my family. You're telling me to sacrifice my future. You're sitting there rich and everything else, but you're telling me to do this. Do it yourself. Show me evidence that you sold your Bitcoin to multiply your Bitcoins, and then we'll come back to it. The second point on that, final point, is that if you're in a country where you're paying taxes, you're building, like in the UK, you're building in a 20% bear market for yourself just by taking that, trying to take that profit to try and multiply your Bitcoins. So let's say whatever happens, it hits that magical line of $200,000 because Pastor Boy told you it's going to, and now it starts coming down. Well, you need it to drop before, like you need it to drop more than 20% before you even get to a point of break even, because you've already got to pay taxes on that realized gain. So what's the point? None of it makes any sense. And we just had a dip in the market. Previously, dips in the market would take 30% off the price of Bitcoin. We just went down 10%. That was it, right? Yeah. So clearly you can see that the volatility here is huge. It's increasing, even though it looks like it's decreasing, right? Because we went down 30%. Normally, we only went down 10%. But that shows you how much buying power there is in the market. I do not want to fight against that wall of money that's coming, right? So that's my final point on that. Now, as far as the final message goes, look, we've been shouting about it for too long, right? My message, there's a sunset that's appearing on the horizon of my message. It is almost over. Daylight is almost here. And now we're going to find out who's been spending the night naked or not. Right? Either you got the one Bitcoin or you don't have the one Bitcoin. The first time in human history, you cannot bullshit your way out of this. You either own it or you do not own it. There is no fiat. There is no leverage. There is no bullshit that can make it look like you're a whole coin or not. And if you're just coming to this message, it's time to fucking panic, Because if you're not panicking, you're going to get, you're already at the point of almost being left behind. And now the jets are going to turn on even more. The jets are warming up and they're going to turn on even more. We are at a moment in history right now in this cycle where in a 2-week window, this asset could go from 100,000 to 150,000. And I don't know many single digit millionaires that have 150 grand. They got 2 or 3 million sitting in their property. I don't know how many of them can actually put in 150 grand into a risky asset. So we are now pricing out low single digit millionaires, let alone high income earners. They're fucked already. We're now talking about millionaires. So you need to think about this, study this, and make this pivot as quick as humanly possible. And if you don't make it, you don't fucking make it. Tough shit.
So hard reality, but it's all facts. British HODL, thank you so much. I'll put all your links below and keep spreading the message. I think it's important for the right people. There's a little bit of time, but TikTok next block, ladies and gentlemen.